We can start now.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session Unifying Female Diaspora in Science. Thank you very much for accepting the request of having such session in such event of the Global Conference on Diaspora Networks in Science. Today, I'm Catherine. I'm Colombian, and I'm right now living in France. I have a PhD in physics, and I work in SWIP, and I'm also part of the OWSD, the Colombian chapter. In today's session, what we're going to focus about is on real stories from female diaspora, not only living either in Latin America or in Europe, but also in Africa. I wanted to bring upon many female diaspora that could share their experience as diaspora, if there are any networks, what kind of difficulties, challenges they have found across the way, what are the solutions, how they have been involved in female diaspora networks. And that's why I am pleased to welcome the speakers of today's sessions, who are my colleagues, Adriana Navarro Suarez, Blurjana Bino, and Clancy Bonilla. Today, we're going to start first with Adriana. Then we're going to stay in the Latin American region by hearing the story of Clancy. Finally, we're going to hear Blurjana. And I'm going to give you, on behalf of two African colleagues, their experience as well. They could not join us today. That's why I'm going to speak on their behalf. And yeah, welcome, and let's hear all the wonderful stories that my colleagues have to tell us today. So please, Adriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm really glad to be here at the Global Conference for Diaspora Networks in Science. I would like to thank the organizers for this important event, to Catherine for applying for this space and thinking about us and inviting us. My name is Adriana Navarro Suarez. I'm originally from Colombia, as Catherine. I did my undergrad there, and then I moved to Europe for a master with an Erasmus Mundus grant. So that meant that I spent 2 years in 4 different countries: France, Poland, Slovenia, and Spain. Then I did my PhD in between Spain and USA, then my postdoc in Sweden, then my Marie Curie fellowship in UK. And since last year, I'm the R&D manager leading the electrolyte development at Morrow Batteries in Norway. So you might know now why I'm have such an interest on the female diasporas in science. And that one of the things I want to tell you today, it's about OWSD Colombia, which is one of the organizations that you might have heard during these days in this conference. OWSD, if you don't know it, it stands for Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World. It's a program by the UNESCO, and the idea is that each country will have their own chapters. So we started the Colombian chapter in May 2021. So we are quite a young organization, quite a young national chapter, but we have grown relatively fast. We started with 30 people, and now we are 170. Why we started this organization? We wanted to promote the development of Colombian scientific women through networks, inputs, and opportunities, and disseminate their contributions to promote the social appropriation of knowledge and extensive levels of influence. Can we go to the next one? Thank you. We also have a vision. This is where we want to go in the next 4 years. We want to be a reference in gender issues in Colombian science and a space of professional and personal development that empowers scientific Colombian women and empowers social imaginaries about it. And how we go through this mission and this vision, how we work on it, is that we are divided in 4 committees. The first committee is the mapping committee. So this committee is in charge of getting to know who we are, the members of this chapter, why did we join, what do we work on, what make us tickle in scientific terms, and why did we join the organization, what do we want to get from the organization. Once the mapping committees have this information, they feed it into the other committees. So a second committee is the communication committee, which is in charge of our social presence. They are the ones who make the press releases for us and make all the publicity for the events that we organize. The third committee is the formation committee. So they are in charge of all the formation activities, of course, the capacitations, workshops, and courses. And then the fourth committee is the internationalization committee, which is the committee I am leading. We are in charge of creating international networks for Colombian and Latin American women and for our national chapter. We also work with other Latin American chapters of OWUSD, and Clancy will tell you a little bit more about it after me. We do have a lot of events in the internationalization committee, but I wanted to talk about two of them specifically. The first one is our podcast. It's in a Spanish podcast. It's called Calidad de Exportación, 100% cerebros colombianos, which translates to exportation quality, 100% Colombian brains. And the idea is that we disseminate the opportunities available to Colombian, but also Latin American scientists in topics such as international mobility, networking, scholarships, and possibilities of articulation for the development of research projects of high impact and relevance. We just finished, we just finished releasing the last episode for the first season last week. In the first season, we had 8 different guests on each episode. We were talking with representatives from different offices. So we talk, for example, with someone from the DAAD, the DAAD in Germany, Colifree, which is an organization between Colombia and France, the representatives from the Embassy of India and Netherlands in Colombia, someone from the National University of Mexico, which is the biggest one in Mexico. And what they were telling us during these episodes were how can we, as Colombians or Latin Americans or Spanish speakers, can get access to their education, to their grants, how we can collaborate with people in those countries, and how can we start our networks and highlight our increase our impact and relevance. In the second season that we are just recording right now, we started a couple of weeks ago. We are talking with people working on scientific diplomacy, which you might have heard of. We are talking, all of them are Colombian, but they are working either in Colombia or abroad, and they are working on how to improve the Colombian scientific diplomacy and how to interact with the diaspora, which is quite relevant to what we are talking about during these 3 days. Our second event I wanted to talk to you about is a meeting we are organizing in November. Is the first meeting of Colombian scientists in diaspora. It's going to be in Brussels, but also we'll have a part online. It's going to be on November 5 and 6. If you are Colombian and you are in diaspora, or even if not, I think this is something that will interest you, and you can sign up on this QR code. It's mainly organized by the OWUSD Colombia, but we also have the support of the international office by the government. We have the Minister of Science and Technology backing us up as well, and the Embassy of Consulate of Colombia in Belgium. And we're going to be talking a lot about how the diaspora can contribute to the scientific diplomacy, what are our opportunities to go back to our country if we want to, how can we create networks with with other Colombian scientists, and how can we give higher impact to our research. So if you have any questions about this, if you are Colombian, please sign up. But you can also contact me through this email that's in the bottom. It's int.awsdcolombia@gmail.com, or you can look for me on the Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk about this event. But if you are not Colombian and you will still like to talk with me about diaspora events and how can the OWSD contribute or create networks with you, I will be happy to talk with you about that as well. Thank you again, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have at one point.
Thank you, Adri. Thanks for your contribution and for being on time as well. Let's continue with experiences of female diasporas coming from Latin America. And now I'm gonna leave the floor to my colleague, Clancy Bonilla from the OWSD Guatemala. Clancy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Greetings to all our friends who join us, and also those who will be part of this activity through the recordings. I'm very happy to be here. Indeed, I am national from Guatemala, and this is the capacity that I'm speaking about today. What have we experienced in OWSD Guatemala, but also expanding a bit to the Central American countries. We are 6 countries. However, 4 of them, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua, we are really, we share several features that makes us lagging scientifically and technologically lagging countries. We have experiences of Costa Rica and Panama, 2 countries with relative advance in terms of science and technology policy, and that's what I will be speaking, share with you today in the next slides. Can we go to the next, please? Here, the first thing is to talk about what is it, the word diaspora, because in Central America particularly, we have experienced massive emigration for decades, particularly toward the United States. And that has consumed our foreign policy, the public debate, and it has charged the word migrant, migration, in the sense that it's a very particular and economic and vulnerable migration. It's to a certain way a forced migration, because we have 2 million Guatemalans, for example, living in the US. We are a 16 million population country, which means several aspects of our economy pushes and forces a big part of the population to emigrate. That's why when we talk about scientific diaspora, we are carefully trying to provide content to this denomination, because in addition to all this situation I'm describing about economic and vulnerable emigration of Central American people towards the United States to work there, we have also used and benefited for international corporations to train and to educate the highly qualified human resources, which are scarce still in the case of Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua particularly. And for decades, we studied abroad because our own local higher education system is still weak and fragmented, and we do not have the capacities to educate at doctoral level. That's important to have in mind. And that's my personal journey that I also wanted to share with you. I was trained and studied for 8 years in South Korea. And that's when I realized the huge potential we had to accumulate and to build scientific workforce. After I finished my graduate studies, I completed a doctoral degree in international cooperation in Korea, because I wanted to understand how South Korea overcame poverty and became the powerhouse, the powerful country in economic terms that it is now. However, I realized the differences, that we needed a different trajectory because of the cultural and socio-political and geopolitical situation in Central America which is not comparable. That's why I returned to Latin America, and I spent 5 years in Chile, which for many indicators is leading country in Latin America. I also found things that cannot be replicated or cannot be copied. That's why I went to the second interesting case of development, very unequal as it happens in most of Latin American countries, like the case of Guatemala, Chile, and Brazil, also Colombia, by the way. So I went 5 years to study what was the process, what Brazil was doing, and all the time having Central American context, socioeconomical and also educational context. After that, I went to Iceland. I spent some time there, and currently I'm in Norway. That's my personal journey, but always thinking in the realities we have in Central America. Let's go to the next slide, please. Here, I want to share with you very recently published 2 papers focused on, one of them in Guatemala and the second in Honduras. Both are trying to explore how to engage this scientific diaspora, both men and women, because I do most of my work related to gender and science. However, in this case, we explore both men and women in the scientific diaspora for Guatemala and for Honduras, because as I share with you in my personal journey, is also present in the case of several other colleagues who are trained, educated, and then employed elsewhere. Because even if we want to return to continue scientific activities and engage in research in our own countries, we do not have the funding, the infrastructure, the laboratories, and the human capacity to engage in high-level scientific production. That's why we remained living elsewhere. In this case, the question is, are we irrelevant to our home countries because we are not living there, or can we channel resources, funding, connections, and become a sort of bridge between the host or the countries of destination and the countries of origin that we belong to? So these 2 papers are available for you to read them, access them. Please share comments, because as I will share you in my last 3 slides, we are trying to put an emphasis on the steps that we need to first identify such diaspora, because there's so little information. We don't have systematic mapping and characterization to understand who are they, where are they doing or their science, in which countries, in which fields, for example, what are their ages, the decisions these members of the scientific diaspora, in this case Central America, what the decisions they made in terms of establishing their residency abroad, usually in developed countries. However, the next step after identifying them and getting to know more of them, it's how can we connect them? And of course, there are several barriers and shortcomings, but it's important to start our conversation. What's the role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, as we have specific guidelines and policies for trade, international trade, and we have their cultural ties, and we build friendships and different type of cooperations. We need to devote and dedicate specific efforts to engage science and become part of regional and of course global discussions in terms of the scientific diaspora. So it's important to find as you can see in the slides, the barriers and of course obstacles, but also propose solutions how to overcome such barriers. So let's remember identifying, mapping, understanding, then connecting, and let's go to the last stage which will be the engagement, because we have to think in terms of systematic engagement, not sporadic or episodical or isolated efforts. Some cases can be found already of the willingness and the readiness of many of the members of the scientific diaspora to become assets for their country of origin, because mostly the literature give us studies and serious research done from the perspective of the destination countries. Of where are they? Yes, we know there. Some of them are in North America and Europe. Of course, some countries in Asia, also Australia. However, we need to know what's the perspective from the country of origin and how can we remain relevant. We have now several lessons learned during the pandemic, and I believe this is a starting point where we can engage in serious and productive discussions on how to remain engaged with our countries of origin. We can become an asset and valuable for our countries of origin, but our countries of origin have to be interested in us as well. It's a kind of double way. So I believe this is my last slide, if I'm correct, and I will leave it like this for now, but I remain connected, and of course we can continue our interactions through social media. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Clancy, for all your takeaways from these two very interesting research papers that actually have caught my particular attention, because whenever we speak about diasporas, I have found out that there are not so much research about it, and it's also very important to, as you said, not only to speak about it, but also to have references to go to provide guidelines, not only for the foreign, for us who are abroad, but also to our local governments. And this is also very important that we can connect together with Adri, because as she said, with the OWSD, the Colombian chapter, we're also trying to shake a little bit the diplomacy in Colombia, because as you very well highlighted, one of the main disadvantages from the diasporas, it's we don't know what to do when we come back. And we are also part of our own country. So yeah, thank you very much for all these takeaways, and I invite to all the attendees and the future attendees to have a look at these two research papers. They are very interesting takeaway messages. And now we move from diasporas in Latin America to my colleague Georgiana, who is going to speak about her initiative, the SciDev, that I also found very interesting to highlight in today's session. And she's from Albania. And so we move from Latin America to Europe. And yeah, thank you, Georgiana, for accepting the invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It is a pleasure to be here. Actually, the first interventions were basically Adriana and Caitlin. Intrigued me and motivated me to see the opportunity of starting a chapter on Albania on OWSD, if that is possible at all. And also a lot of the constraints or issues that Kingsley were mentioning, like if you remove out Honduras and put Albania, even though different contexts, some of the issues are very similar, and I'll try to cover them as well. As you mentioned, I represent the Center for Science and Innovation for Development, a Tirana-based think tank in Albania, a tiny country in Southeast Europe. Just a little bit of context: Albania has had many migratory waves, and that's why our diaspora has expanded over time, and data shows that more Albanians live outside of the, let's say, official state borders of the Republic than inside. And recently we have had other migratory waves of young people and highly skilled individuals as well, and this has brought into attention again the issues of brain drain, brain gain, and particularly brain circulation, and that's where diaspora comes in. There is a lot of let's say presence or attention paid to the diaspora, at least in public discourse and political discourse, but unfortunately there are limited concrete actions for their engagement, particularly when we talk about the academia and science in Albania. So I will start a little bit with the context and then move on into what SciDev and our network of Albanian women in STEM is doing. Most of the current initiatives in Albania are donor-driven programs. We have the IOM, the European Union, the Regional Cooperation Council, and an American Albanian Development Fund that are working specifically on diaspora. IOM focuses focuses particularly on issues of economy, but AADF and RRCC are also focusing on how to engage scientific diaspora and academics in Albania through concrete programs such as fellowships, short stay, or joint projects together. Most of the successful stories of diasporas in engagement in the science and research sector in Albania are actually individual stories. So basically very proactive, motivated individuals who have wanted to make a difference. I can mention here Ben Mercoci. He is a scientist working in Barcelona in Spain, and he has done a lot for the Nanotechnology Research Center at the Academy of Science in Albania from a personal approach and personal motivation and willingness, without having stronger institutional support, at least in Albania. And there are many other stories. Myself, I've been a diaspora. I studied in UK, in Austria, then again in UK and in Sweden, and I've returned back. So, and there are others in different fields that are working to strengthen these relations. But again, they mostly individual rather than institutional, which make it difficult in terms of sustainability. What we see, particularly since the pandemic, that there is increased attention in the media regarding diaspora scientists. We saw that main TV station and media outlets invited Albanian scientists in the diaspora to provide their expertise and knowledge regarding COVID, the pandemic, the uncertain times we are living in. And this increased also the attention of institutions or other actors to engage more with the diaspora. There are some emerging platforms that are working in this regard. The first one is the Network of Albanian Women in STEM that SciDef has established. In the past 2 years, we've been a network on linking research with society since 2015. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to identify successful our focus is on women diaspora abroad in science, but also in industry, connect them with Albanian women in the academia and industry and civil society as well, and try to engage them as much as possible and also to promote them in the Albanian sphere. There is another initiative by the Albanian IT Association that is trying to promote and to connect particularly women in tech, and men as well in tech, in ICT, in Europe and in the United States, with experts, individuals and institutions in Albania. If we can move to the next one, please. In terms of the challenges, I group them in two. So there are structural and institutional, then at individual level. The first one is that there is limited systematic and resilient sustainable approach at policy level. In 2017, the new government established a dedicated state minister for the diaspora. 4 institutions were set up. A lot of funding by the state and by international donors was provided for the engagement of diaspora in the economy of Albania, and particularly in academia and science as well. After 4 years, without having a clear picture evaluation of what happened, the government simply decided to shut down all this institution and dismiss the Minister of State Diaspora. So after 4 years, the diaspora for the state was no longer a priority, and this created fragmentation and, of course, discontinuation. So the lack of systematic approach. Second, higher education institutions in Albania have many challenges. We will need definitely other conferences and panels to discuss about that. But one of the constraints is the issue that they don't engage strategically with diaspora. As I said, it's either individual that work with one another, network and do things together, or in some cases, Erasmus Plus program of the European Union has helped. But again, in terms of individual mobility and some fellowships, not all of them have moved into institutional cooperation that can ensure more sustainability or more opportunities for other persons to be engaged. And again, limited funding on science and research in terms of resources, infrastructure, and quality of research are additional challenge that add into this, and sometimes excellent academics and scientists, Albanian scientists abroad, might not be so confident in in starting working with institutions or researchers in Albania, considering these issues of constraints in terms of quality. And at individual level, we've done some, let's say, small studies, not very comprehensive, but what we see from survey in-depth interviews is that even though there is some willingness from the academic diaspora, life gets in the way in the sense that they have a lot of pressure, a lot of work to do, different setup where they live and work, and this might leave little space to engage much with their country of origin. And on the side of the Albanian academics, there might be interest, but the issue is that not always these efforts are recognized in their career path, and sometimes they even lack the capabilities to set up this connection, so to identify where the diaspora is, to set up the connection and to engage them. And in this sense, that's why networks are important, but at the moment they are very vulnerable, are very new. And I will briefly now talk about our network, if we can move to to the next slide, thank you. The Network of Albanian Women in STEM was established basically through a process of consultation with local stakeholders, but also we involved diaspora women, particularly in science and industry abroad, to advise us on this. We saw that there was a need, but we needed their approach on how to go about with it. So our approach is basically involving them in our program. We are a think tank. We do mainly research and advocacy actions and capacity building for young researchers, young professionals. So we try to include them as much as possible as a way as well to broaden the connection and the network with local women in science. Almost all of the research that we do is collaborative research, so we always try to engage an academic in diaspora as a senior researcher or as a reviewer or as a quality assurance, let's say, person. And we've worked mostly and primarily on the promotion and visibility of Albanian successful women in science abroad. We have a specific podcast channel, STEMspresso. Each month, we have a woman in science that shares her story, but also provides advice for other young girls and women that want to pursue a career in STEM, particularly, but also in science. And we combine local women in science with the ones in diaspora. We've invited them to become members of Now STEM to provide mentorship and support for, particularly for young girls that want to study abroad and follow their same path. Depending on funding and when we have had project funding from donors, to be honest, we've also provided opportunities for fellowships on short stays. Again, here our approach is for them to start with individual connections that can move into broader institutional cooperation that can become sustainable and provide more opportunities for other girls and women in STEM. And also access to regional networks is very important. Albania is a very tiny country. As I mentioned, the entire Western Balkan is a small region. So to create a critical mass, let's say, and to have more opportunities, we need to work together. So access to regional networks and cooperation is also very, very important. This is what we are doing at the moment. Of course, this cannot be done alone. We are trying to raise awareness as much as possible on stakeholders, particularly universities, and work with those that have more willingness approach to do this, but also with donors or bigger organizations, international organizations that have some sensitivity or interest towards this issue. I am open not only for Albanian diaspora abroad, but also for others, colleagues and partners to talk and discuss further. And again, I'm very grateful for this opportunity because it already provided some very good insights for our work in the future. This is our context. Thank you again. I'm looking forward to cooperating in the future.
Thank you very much for your contribution and for opening up another very important point, which is what's the role of us as diasporas? We can, and Clancy also mentioned that we can be a channel. We can be a bridge in between our country of origin and the country where we are living in. But it's very important to find the support. to find networks, to raise awareness of who we are, what can we do, because there are many of us that wants to collaborate, to fulfill some necessities back in our homeland, but we don't know how. And so thank you very much for expressing what are the strategies of the SciDef and how we can collaborate. And I really hope that you are motivated to open a chapter of OWSD in Albania. And I'm sure that you will be able to. Don't hesitate to contact us, especially Adri, who had the experience of opening up the chapter in Colombia, and of course Clancy as well, that she did in Guatemala. And I would like to, in the last minutes, I would like to speak on behalf of my colleagues Kadi Sal and Raifu Agoro, who allowed me to share with you some of their thoughts about the science diasporas in Africa. Both of them are African. Kadi, she came back to Africa, but Raifu stayed in the US. You can listen to these and other podcasts about science in Africa in Nature, and this is the link. And I just wanted to share their experience also of that creating, for instance, Kadi, the Science Education Exchange for Sustainable Development, and Raifu, the African Diaspora Scientists Federation. And the bottom-up message here from all the experiences that we have heard so far today, and it's not only in science, but also in general, that the diasporas, and I really like this sentence from Jemoa Ubemnidiu, that he says, so here you are, too foreign for home, too foreign for here, but never nor for both. So the takeaway message that I want to share with you today, that was maybe mainly the motivation of myself of creating this session in this conference, is we can become a bridge. We can be a channel in between our country of origin and the country we were living in, and the many countries that we have been in. So do not give up. It's a motivation for all of us out there that have this necessity, this willingness to do something for your homeland, but you think that you are so far away, but at the same time you can be so close if we can connect in this type of networks. And with these last words, I would like to thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. And in the last 4 minutes, I would like to open up to questions if there are any. And if not, then I would like to take the opportunity to ask our speakers of today to give some last words. I'm just checking quickly if there are some questions in the chat. It doesn't seem to be the case. So in 1 minute, Adri, can you please give us some last words?
Sure. I would like to invite everyone to join the national chapters of OWSD or create new ones, as Leriana was saying. I think it was, for me, it has been an incredible experience. I have learned a lot during this past year, working together with amazing women like Catherine. And you get to understand a little bit better your country, and also how can you help it. So that's my invitation today.
Thank you, Adri. Clancy, please give us some last wonderful words.
Certainly, thank you. I would invite all the members of the scientific community, the researchers, to reach out to those actors in the policy sector and vice versa, for us to have our viewpoints exchanged, enhanced, and enriched. Because sometimes we talk among each other and we share the challenges and opportunities, but it's important to see things from the other perspective for both cases. That's why I also emphasize what Adriana mentioned about science diplomacy. You also mentioned that, Catherine, how important it is to think in foreign policy and science and technology policies together for, again, getting to know among ourselves, regionally important, but also globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Clancy. And last but not least, Mariana, can you give us some last words?
Thank you very much, Catherine. I think we definitely need to support each other and build alliances for our common goal. But as Casey was saying, in addition to policy, I strongly believe in the idea of the quadruple helix, of engaging other actors in society in issues of science research and diasporas, including civil society, media, and the private sector as well. So broader coalition and alliances are very important if we really want to achieve concrete results with the networks and other opportunities provided to diasporas and local scientists as well. Thank you again for the opportunity.
So thank you all of you for the as well the attendees, and I hope that the future listeners to this session will kept our message and our motivation. Let's stay in touch. Let's this not be the first, and let's this be the first one, but not the last time we meet. And with this, I wish you all a good weekend and a good end of the conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.